Before we start, understand this clearly. What happened on Flight 728 wasn't just a mid-air argument or a bad customer service moment. It was the kind of incident that forces an entire airline to rewrite its rulebook. What started as a simple boarding routine turned into a 3-hour pressure chamber where every minute added fuel to a fire nobody expected. The cabin door had just shut, the jet bridge pulling away, when Sloane, the senior flight attendant, marched through the aisle with clipped steps, her expression already tight with irritation. She scanned the rows like she was searching for someone to blame before the plane had even left the ground. Passengers were still finding their seats, adjusting headrests, settling in. It was noisy, chaotic, normal, but her eyes landed on one man and something shifted in her. Sergeant Malik Hayes, a black soldier returning home after 9 months overseas, was helping an elderly couple with their overhead luggage. He lifted the suitcase carefully, making sure the elderly man didn't strain himself. The moment Sloane saw this, she snapped, "Sir, sit down. You people always delay departure." Her tone was sharp enough to cut the air in half. Conversations died mid-sentence. A baby stopped crying. Even the hum of the engines seemed to quiet. Malik froze for a second, processing her tone, not surprised, but disappointed. He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice. He just nodded respectfully and sat down. The elderly woman whispered, "Thank you for helping us," but Sloane shot her a glare like even kindness annoyed her. 2 minutes passed. Sloane came back down the aisle, this time stopping right in front of Malik as if she'd been waiting to confront him again. She pointed at his military backpack. "This isn't authorized carry-on. I'll have it removed." Malik, still calm, showed her the TSA clearance tag, the top security mark reserved for military personnel. Sloane ignored it. "That doesn't mean anything to me," she said, raising her voice so people would stare. Malik stayed polite, quietly explaining, but she leaned closer and closer, invading his space, her breath hitting his cheek. He raised his hands slightly, not to touch her, but as a gentle boundary, a silent request for space, and that was the spark that blew the situation open. Sloane slapped his hand away, loud and sharp, the sound echoing down the aisle. A woman across the aisle gasped. A man shook his head in disbelief. Sloane yelled, "Don't you dare put your hands on me," even though the entire row saw Malik hadn't touched her. Tension rippled through the plane like a shockwave. People exchanged looks. A teenager in row 14 stood up and said loudly, "Ma'am, he didn't even touch you." Sloane spun toward him and snapped, "Sit down or I'll have you removed from this flight too." Her voice was shrill, panicked, defensive. The elderly couple Malik had helped earlier quickly flagged another attendant, Lewis, who hurried over. His eyes widened the moment he saw Sloane's body language and Malik's controlled posture. He knew exactly what kind of situation he had just stepped into. For the next 30 minutes, Sloane kept circling Malik's row like a storm cloud refusing to pass. She muttered accusations under her breath, fabricated details, kept insisting Malik had threatened her even though he hadn't spoken more than 2 sentences since taking his seat. Malik sat motionless, jaw clenched, breathing steady, doing exactly what his training taught him: never escalate a situation no matter how provoked. Passengers began quietly recording. Some whispered about reporting her. Others looked angry, uncomfortable, unsure whether the flight was going to erupt into something worse. Lewis walked to the cockpit, whispered to the captain, and the cockpit door cracked open just enough for the captain to hear everything. The captain's face tightened. He instructed Lewis to gather witness statements. Within seconds, 11 passengers volunteered. Lewis collected short written statements, some with timestamps from video recordings. Sloane noticed. Her face twisted with panic, and she rushed toward a woman recording on her phone. Sloane grabbed at the phone, yelling, "You can't record crew without permission." The woman jerked her hand back, refusing to let her take it. That single moment turned the entire plane against Sloane. Halfway into the flight, turbulence hit, light at first, then heavy enough that the overhead bins rattled. But the real turbulence was human. Sloane insisted Malik should be restrained for crew safety. A man in first class, a retired judge, finally spoke loudly enough for the whole cabin to hear. "What you did to that soldier is assault. You need to sit down before you make this worse for yourself." Sloane froze. She looked around, but nobody supported her. Every face she met was angry or disappointed. The turbulence passed, but the tension didn't. Malik sat still, resting his hands on his thighs, eyes lowered, but you could feel the weight in his silence. Lewis stood beside him like a quiet guard, making sure Sloane didn't get near him again. As the plane began descending, the cabin felt too quiet, too heavy. Even Barbies were silent, as if they sensed the adults' emotions. The captain made a rare announcement, not the usual prepare for landing, but a serious one. Security will be meeting our aircraft upon arrival. Please remain seated. Passengers exchanged looks. Sloane's breathing turned uneven. She whispered under her breath, "He's dangerous, he threatened me," louder and louder, as if trying to convince herself. The passengers had enough. Nearly half the cabin shouted back. "He did. Stop lying. We all saw what happened. You slapped *him. The wheels touched down, the seatbelt signs turned off, the door opened, and 2 airport security officers stepped into the aircraft. Sloane immediately pointed at Malik and said, "That's him, remove him." But the officers didn't even look at Malik. They walked straight past him. Sloane's hand dropped slowly as she realized her accusations weren't landing anymore. "Ma'am," one officer said firmly, "we need to speak with you. Please step off the aircraft." Her mouth fell open. "Me, why me?" he threatened he. The second officer said, "We have multiple witness statements. Please come with us." Passengers watched as Sloane was escorted down the aisle she once marched through so confidently. She didn't speak. She didn't look at anyone. Her authority collapsed the moment the truth caught up to her. Only after she disappeared into the jet bridge did Malik finally rise from his seat. For a moment, he simply stood there, letting out a slow breath, the first real release of tension in 3 long hours. And then the clapping began. Soft at first, then louder, until the entire cabin applauded him, not for being a soldier, but for maintaining dignity under pressure no one deserved. As he stepped into the jet bridge, Lewis placed a gentle hand on his arm and said quietly, "I'm really sorry you had to go through that, sir." Malik nodded with a small smile. "You did the right thing, that's what matters." What happened after that, viral videos, press interviews, airline apologies, lawsuits brewing, is another story entirely. But in those 3 hours on Flight 728, one truth became clear: dignity stays steady even when the sky doesn't.